Philosophy of science. That might sound a bit odd to you. After all, aren't philosophy and science very different enterprises? Science, on the one hand, is empirical. It involves experiment, gathering of data, observation. Philosophy, on the other hand, is non-empirical. For the most part, philosophers don't conduct experiments. They consider thought experiments, but that's different than conducting scientific experiments. However, on one way of thinking about philosophy, philosophy is just the discipline that investigates fundamental questions about nature and human experience, where a fundamental question is just one that takes very little for granted. It assumes very little. It gets right to the core of the matter. Understood in this way, philosophy is an activity that can be applied to any subject matter, really, including science. Philosophy of science is just the investigation of fundamental questions about science. So let me give you some examples. Philosophers of science are interested in what distinguishes science from non-science or pseudoscience. So astrology, not so scientific. Astronomy, scientific. Like, what's the difference? What's the difference there? They also wonder about confirmation and disconfirmation of scientific theories. How are theories confirmed? How are theories disconfirmed? Can a single experiment or observation or set of observations conclusively refute a theory? More generally, what's the relationship between a theory and observational data? We can also ask about the interpretation of science. So suppose some theory is successful. Should we interpret that as meaning that the theory is true, that it correctly describes reality? Or should we instead merely conclude that the theory is empirically adequate? It's consistent with all the data that we have, and that perhaps it's predictively useful. How should we interpret a successful scientific theory? Okay, so these are just some examples of the kinds of questions that philosophers of science ask. If they sound interesting to you, consider taking philosophy of science with me, Dr. Michael Roche. Thank you.